what are the characteristics, those things. So this is how first we did, and then after that I already constructed an animal characteristic anchor chart, and based on that they have to guess that what type of categories and what are the um, like what are the characteristics suits to an snake, which is a reptile, or to a penguin, something like that. Then I introduced a like sentence frame so that kids can look at those category characteristics and then use a sentence frame to describe those animals and the characteristics. So once they understand that okay, these are the types, these goes together, once we gave like small pair of cards with details and different type of animals to each group. So we made a group of like 7 with 2 people each, and then they sorted them out together with a partner, and then we as a class sort them together again. And once we did that, we created
You
the
mean
box.
like corrected the sort so that everybody understood why each animal was in a certain category? Okay.
Why? But I didn't have to correct a lot because most of them were very efficient. They knew better than me, like how to do that. Sometimes I took in help from you also, that what is an amphibian and where the mammal, for example, the whale should be. So so they were very efficient. So everything was in correct order. And after that, I made the information box and and see
Sorry.
that's happened. Like,
Allergies.
yeah, like, I'm cannot stop like coughing. And so after that, we created a box. So I tried to explain them. See, this is a big information now. How we are going to put them together in only one box or only one page. So they came up with ideas, and then we decided we go with the tally mark, which they already learned in grade 1, and we sorted those animals according to their types
Yeah.
using a box. That's what they learned that day, that how to sort and how to put the data in one place, and from that data how to uh, ask questions.
Okay.
So after that, so this is what happened as a
Yeah.
formative assessment. Then we did application problem and then exit tickets.
Right, right. Yeah. It went well. It started off with a very enthusiastic kind of refresher about vocabulary and sorting and characteristics, since it kind of tied in with our science as well. You asked a lot of questions quickly, which kept it moving nicely. And you used lots of kids' names, so that had helped them stay engaged. But I think the key was that when it moves fast, then the kids stay engaged. They don't have time to do their little side
Right.
conversations. So that was really good. And I think the part about like what can we do to put this information, the time might have been better spent just telling them, like just explicitly saying, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to put in this table, and using that word table, we're going to put in this table how many reptiles we counted in our deck of cards, how many mammals we counted. Because I think for some they like the guessing, and for others they just kind of lost a little of their energy. And I would be, it's a fine line between, what do I call it, like that inquiry, having them inquire, but also just telling them, this is what we want you to do. Because then all that time you could have more time for building those questions, right? And they had to do some questions in their own problem sets too, didn't they? Right? So maybe even having a couple of sentence frames for those questions. I guess they'd be question frames then, but like, how many blank and blank more were there than blank? How many less, you know, blank than that? Just to give them a couple of frames. Because that's a new and harder skill, isn't it?
Right.
Giving those sentence frames like you did in the beginning was perfect. Because everybody was able to use that to describe, how did it go? Like,
Right.
a bird has wings and lays eggs. A mammal gives birth alive and feeds their babies milk, something like that. They could do that, and it was because you helped them. But then forming the questions is another layer for that, right? And that's when things get real quiet. And you know those 10 who are going to get very quiet. They're not going to share. And then you've got silliness, Peter, shouting out his ideas. Okay, that's really, I thought the lesson was great. The kids are into it. And clearly from the next day, when they had some time to absorb what they had done, they were really able the next day to just take off with it. They got through that first day with all the lesson and all the thinking and listening and working with their partner. And then the next day they felt so confident that they could do a lot more work, even with more independence. Yeah.
So I have a question, because I really asked like this, framing the questions, and I never did that before. So, for example, that if I want to do the bar graph with a word problem on Monday,
Okay.
so how I can form questions? Shall I give a paper like which has a drawing of the bar graph, and then give like
So is it something you want to do as a class to model, or do you want the kids to do
themselves?
To do themselves?
That's what you.
Yeah, but if you want them to write questions, right?
Write questions.
Well, then maybe we just make a little, like an index-sized card for each child.
Okay.
If you want help with writing a question, and have just 2 or 3 different ways. The simple one is just comparing one number to another number. How many more blank than blank? How many less blank than blank? But then they have those, when they combine, how many more blank and blank are there than... Okay. And then there could be one where you combine how many...
Like fewer and more with that question.
How many fewer one thing are there than these 3 things? Something like that. But you just have to put a blank for each, because you don't know if the category is going to be,
right.
animals, or if it's going to be colors or something.
I understood now. I think like this, like index card, like simple and combine, like different questions.
Yeah.
And maybe 2 examples and give it to them.
Yeah.
And then we will ask them to make 5 questions out of that, like that. That's what you
How
meant?
many more something are there
Than dash and dash, like blank
like
and
that.
blank. Right?
Yeah. So that they actually see the question words and the conclusion. You'll want to make sure that the verbs fit whatever the categories are.
It's true.
Because it might be is instead of are,
Of course.
Just then that would be a simple one, and then you could do one that's more complex. You could even just start out with how many something and something do you see? Do you count? Just to get them started, just combining things. Okay. And that's just the question. Okay? Oh my gosh, the door just blew open.
Okay.
Okay. I think that would be a great. You hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
It was a very good lesson. It's about assessment, though. So tell me, what would you do assessment-wise, to see if everybody understood the ideas here, or was it being an introduction? Is it just to look at their next day's work or something?
So for formative assessment,
Mm-hmm.
it's the application problem they can create, and then one exit ticket, or
Okay,
maybe
but
like formative assessments are always like they working together. We are observing or asking them questions, or giving them an application problem. For summative assessment, I can definitely make one problem which is related to this.
you can also do that for formative. Just make one problem,
Right.
but you're only using it to group later or determine your lesson for later,
Right,
right?
right.
Mm-hmm.
Because in this module, they ask like, what if suppose I have to do a formative, what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I will pick any one problem, and then I will underline the important words, and after that, they have like a box
Mm-hmm.
where they can. I will give like for example, if it's one question then one answer box, they will do the problem there. And then if I have a word problem and I want them to explain in words, then I will give them a sentence frame that these there are blank number of apples, for example. So this is how I'm going to make a formative assessment for
Mm-hmm.
them,
Okay.
so that I understand, and then I will follow the same rubric like beginning, approaching, and achieving,
Mm-hmm.
and then beginning if they are cannot understand the problem, and approaching is if they need my help to do it,
Mm-hmm.
or achieving is if
Mm-hmm.
they did it
Mm-hmm.
themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And this summative will be independent work,
Mm-hmm.
not taking help from any of the partners if I have to do a summative assessment.
Okay. Okay. Um, there's a couple of kids here who English is not their first language and they're not as confident in it.
Mm-hmm.
What will you do to kind of accommodate them?
Them, okay. First is like for them, maybe I will also give an choice if they want to use the many cards or manipulate. Suppose this is a problem I gave, and then if that problem needs some visual cues
Mm-hmm.
or pictures, I might bring them out for them so that they understand that the reptile looks like this. It depends on what type of question it is. If it's about a coin
Mm-hmm.
or a die, then maybe I will print out the picture of the coin and or the die. And also the another thing is a visual. The pictures are important, and they if maybe like we need I need will give them like sentence frame
Mm-hmm.
to do the word problem, which is they can explain their thinking or like start with that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like what we did, like Amy's strategy is this because like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Great. And sometimes with the vocabulary, it's one thing to write them on a chart, then we can refer to them, but it's also good to have the word with a picture right there as well.
Right.
So we want to be sure we bring out any vocab right away. We can put it on an A3 piece of paper, and put them up in the room for the unit so that they're there just to keep reminding,
Okay.
right? So some vocab would be, um, especially if it's vocab is going to be used later on an assessment, bar graph, picture graph,
Mm-hmm.
categories, we want to